Over the years that I've known Philip, I have come to think of him as my adopted dad and his three sons as the three little brothers that I never had. And one of the jokes, the to mess with you is to love you bits that we love to bring up with Philip is, have I shared with you the 5 levels of mastery? The 5 levels of mastery is maybe the first thing Philip ever taught me, and each and every time it comes up, he forgets that he has shared it with one of us. So this joke has gone so far that even one of my good friends, a guy that worked for me at one of my jobs and is now a client of our consulting firm, who has never met Philip, refers to him as Philly 5 Levels. So that is the nickname that extends beyond that. But the bottom line is it is a fantastic topic. It is really a core bit of learning and understanding that really helps you out in a lot of different ways. So with that, we will start episode 15 of the Valuability Podcast, Understanding the 5 Levels of Mastery. The Valuability Podcast is for financial advisors, business owners, and anyone interested in financial planning, business, leadership, and personal development. We believe that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. My name is Danforth Fleek. I was a financial advisor and product wholesaler for over 20 years in the financial services industry. Each week, I am joined by my mentor, as I mentioned in the intro, longtime friend, adopted dad, Philip Simonson. Philip has been in financial services for over 40 years in a ton of different roles, from financial advisor to field leader to vice president of advisor development. So, Philip, back in... always we come back to the weather, back in the hot and humid in Minnesota. How is it up in up north?
It is amazing how 4 hours difference drive time makes in weather. We were, it's beautiful. It forget spring, as we talked about. We did hit summer, but it's not 96 hitting the heat. I think your heat index is over 100. We might hit 80, 85 today. So it's very nice.
Excellent. We're going to have to come up and visit as soon as we're allowed to get close to one another again. So hopefully that will be soon. You can find the Valuability Podcast wherever you find your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn. You can find it on our YouTube channel. Search Value-Ability on YouTube to find that. Or you can find it on our website, value-ability.com. Click on the Episodes tab, and our player is right there. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter is where the best way to get in touch with us if you have questions or topics or articles you'd like us to review. Instagram is where we put visuals. This week we do have a document that we will be discussing, so you can find it on our website or on our Instagram account. Both our Twitter and Instagram are at value_ability. And you can also always reach us on Facebook. Search at Valuability, all one word. So, Philip, the 5 levels of mastery. As much as I kid you about it, the first 3 I can fire off, and then usually 4 and 5 trip me up. So I am actually looking forward to you sharing the 5 levels of mastery with me one more time, so I can make sure I get it nailed down.
Maybe the story will help you with 4 and 5. It was 1990. I was asked to go over to England for a year to 18 months to help launch a new financial planning company for American Express. And we were living in Dallas for about 2.5 years, helping co-run a region of 14 divisions. Now, when I arrived in Dallas, we were 12 out of 13 regions in the company scorecard. And trust me, 12th wasn't something to brag about. It was on the other end of the continuum. By the time, though, Jim and I left the region, for me to go over to England, we and Jim took the number one production region over for Amex. We were number one. So I was asked to take some of the processes around recruiting, sales, coaching, leadership development, and share with our great British allies over in England. Now, there was this British gentleman on loan from the parent company of Amex, we'll just say John C., and he was our head of sales. Now, the first week I met him in our London Covent Garden office. I'm about 33 years old at the time. He tells me, all right, here's your first assignment, is to go around next week, and I don't want you driving. I'll get you a chauffeur. I don't want you messing around with the motorways yet, but I want you to go and see the 8 division managers and their district managers and their new recruits, and then report back to me the next Friday, because I understand you're going to be running your first training session for the district managers here in Covent Garden. I said, okay, great. So the next Friday comes, I'm, teach the first hour. I decide to go see John on break, and he asked me, tell me, what do you think? Now, remember the 3 things to running a successful business or practice we shared in other podcasts. First one is managing net income. Second is managing process. And third, managing people. And it, not necessarily in that order. But so then I said, well, when I asked the divisional vice presidents, how long before you break even? Example, if you have, you have lovely offices here, you got chairs to, put cheeks in seats here. You're paying these advisors a first year salary. So how many recruits are you going to need to hire and then at what retention rate, and then of course what production level or goal is needed? So are you going to break even in the first year, second, third? And John just says to me, and he says, my gosh, he says, I just paid a large consulting fee out to the company, and they didn't give me the answers to those questions. They didn't even address that. Those, of course, help you manage the net income. What else did you learn and observe? Well, I just said, John, why are the offices located where they are? You see, when I then asked the divisional vice presidents, how many premium households do you have to have in your demographic area? Because if you're relying on sending out 1,000 mailers at that time, and Amex was very good, you send out 1,000. If you got 1 or 2% response rate on that perforated business reply card you turn back in, that was great. But we'd get 3 to 4% to get qualified clients. I said, I'd just like to know that. So is there enough households to support the 30 to 50 advisors you're going to need to fill the chairs again in these offices? And I just got dead-looking stares at me. And John says, well, that's easy to answer. Those offices are where they are because that's where the divisional vice presidents, that's where they live. I said, well, great. Guess we didn't learn anything from the States on that matter. Anything else to share? I said, yeah. There's 2 divisional vice presidents I'd fire right now. He said, which 2? And he said, that's the same thing the psychiatrist said. I'm going to keep it clean. His words were a little bit different than that. He mentioned they weren't ready. So John looks at me and he says, we're getting ready to do the official launch here in 2 weeks. He says, I can't let both of them go. Can you run one of those offices and still train these other managers for at least, 6 months to a year? Well, of course, I said yes. And he asked me if I felt comfortable stepping them down. And again, I said, yeah, I can do that. I have experience doing that. I'll take care of it on Monday. I'll go up there. And I said, well, John, I got to get going here now. I got to get back to the train the district managers. But I said, I want to thank you. And he says, for what? Well, for not for allowing me not to be a consultant anymore. He says, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, you see, John, a consultant knows 50 ways to make love, but they don't have a lover. And I walk out of his office, and I'm going down the hallway, and all of a sudden I get a tap on the shoulder. And I turn around, there's Johnny. Says, "Oh, by the way, you better be a frickin' good lover." And I just looked at him and I said, "Oh boy. All right. Brits 1, Yanks 0. Well, the point of that whole story, and 8 months later, that division, Cambridge, it was starting out of the gates last out of the 8, brought it up to number 2 amongst the 8. Against number 1 was Covent Garden in central London. Tough to beat when you got 10 million people living in the city, and many more coming into the city each and every day. So what the benefit was for me there, it allowed me the opportunity to demonstrate the processes that I was going to be teaching. I could walk the talk instead of just talk the walk. And from there, I ended up, and my family, we were there for 5 years. Just had a great ride and loved the UK, and it was just a fabulous experience.
I'll take this moment to jump in and mention outside of the state of Minnesota, where, because we're both located here, obviously we have the most listens in the state of Minnesota. Outside of that, however, the UK is number 2. So thanks to all the listeners over in the United Kingdom, and please keep passing us around over there, and glad to have you listening to us. I think we had a total of 30 listeners in the United Kingdom, so special shout out to them.
Yeah, and we're just starting, so that's good. Well, let's get stuck into this 5 levels of mastery. Dan, where can they find the diagram that we're going to be using if they want to follow along here today?
Absolutely. Thanks for reminding me. You can find it on our website, value-ability.com. Click on the content tab, and then we have a section for all of the downloads, and then also the articles that we cover. We put links at the bottom of that page, or you can find it on our Instagram account. Search at value_ability on Instagram. We turn it into pictures and post it up on the Instagram account as well. So either of those spots.
Excellent. Now, if some of you would just want to listen along, but I'm going to ask you to visualize a pyramid, because we're going to start by talking about these 5 levels of mastery at the bottom of or the base of the pyramid. But mastery, first, it takes about 10,000 hours, a little over that, to get your become a journeyman or a journey person, to be a master electrician, etc. Or that's about 5 years. If you look at 2,000 working hours in a year, and you've got 10,000 hours to become considered a master of your trade. So it just in itself, it takes time, and there'll be starts and stops, and you're going to get great growth for a while, then you're going to level off before you go to the next level. So it's about practicing patience and endurance to continue to end up mastering any particular skill or your profession. Now, at the base of the pyramid, the first level of mastery is, or the first step, do as you're told. And the reason for that is because you don't know what you don't know. Another way of looking at that is you are unconscious incompetent. So at the beginning here, the leader's role is going to be more time consuming. What I'm going to do here for the people who are more novices, and I share this, when do I use these 5 levels of mastery? Dan already kicked it off. One area is when I got a new hire. I said, now I'm going to share with you the 5 steps of mastery. Now, the first step then, as the leader, is I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. Then I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to observe you doing it. And if you do that, for a number of times, you're going to start going naturally to the second step. And the second step of mastery is do as you're told and identify gaps. Identifying gaps, because now you can do that because now you know what you don't know. And now you're becoming more conscious incompetent. You can start analyzing because you've got in your memory, a reference bank to fall upon.
I'll jump in real quick
Sure.
and say, now I'm starting to put things together after all these years as to why you would have started out with the 5 levels of mastery with me, because I was certainly a know-it-all at age 22, and I am certain that I probably would have wanted all kinds of explanations and why do we do it this way and I have a better way. And by explaining the 5 levels of mastery, especially to a young snot-nosed punk who thinks he knows it all already, you're laying out that groundwork, right? That, hey, look, when I tell you to do something, it's not because I'm being, a dictator or I am being mean or anything. It's just, you don't know what you don't know. Do the task, and then we can circle back.
Very good, Dan. And a couple items there. One, as you're kicking this off, if you're the leader and you're sharing this with someone, don't confuse potential with ability. And a lot of people do. And I look at ability a little bit differently. Underneath ability, for someone to be high in ability, they must, these four components must be visible. And I use an acronym called TRUE. So T stands for, have you ever been trained on this task before? R equals role perception. Do you accept these tasks as part of your job? The best time to control role perception is in the hiring process. When I used to work with our field leaders and said, well, that was a bad hire. I said, well, we had a phrase, Jim and I, there's no such thing as a bad hire. But the reality is there is. There is a bad hire. However, the however or the but, what you can't do is, hang it as an excuse. When 6 months later, that person comes to you and said, you know what, this isn't what I signed up for. Then what that is telling you, you did not do a good job in the selection process where you explain to them, hey, here's your daily tasks here and responsibilities. Here's your weekly, monthly. That the best time to control role perception. And by the way, the leader controls role perceptions. Do you accept these tasks as part of your role? Not the follower is in the initial stages, or another place is when they're taking on a new role and they're getting promoted. Now the next is U in the acronym TRUE. Do you understand what to say and how to say it? And then E is recent, relevant, successful experience at doing the task. Operative words there, recent, relevant, successful. If for someone to be high in ability, you must see all 4 components there of that acronym TRUE must be high. If any one of them are missing, the likelihood then of the follower being able to complete the task successfully will be low. And I used to tell, and Dan, you probably recall, look, it's okay to say, I'm low in ability. I wouldn't expect you to be high in ability in all these tasks. If you were, why would you even be taking on this role, this job? Because you're not going to be growing and learning. So the next thing, besides not, summarize there, don't confuse potential with ability. Look at ability as that acronym TRUE. They must have all 4 components to be high in ability. But before you can judge whether or not they do have high ability, you got to specify the task. And all we're doing here is what Dan was saying, is we're providing a framework in regard to how you're going to support your people in the area of leadership. So the third step now is do as you're told. As you're going up this pyramid, identify gaps and seek help. What you can know is this: Most people never get past this step because of, what do you think it is, Dan?
They don't want to seek help. They're too proud, or they think it is a sign that they're not doing their job correctly, or that there's not enough trust there.
Bingo. Or boom goes the dynamite. You hit it. Number one thing is pride. And pride, there's that old saying, pride comes before the fall. So by sharing this, again, early on with your novice or your new employee, you're taking away. It's okay. You don't have to be prideful here. It's all right to know what you don't know. Actually, we kind of like that. Because what you have, if you empower people to do and own tasks where you have not assessed their ability and they have low ability, all you got, that word empowerment. It's a buzzword, and if the task is very, very low risk and it isn't going to screw up your culture or screw up your net income, all right. In particular, if you don't have time, but don't empower anyone to do a task with low ability. If it's something that really needs to get done, because all you've got then is a motivated idiot running around your office, and that's going to cause more damage. So I look at this as I say, all right, at this point, just you got to ask experts, and this is where you come to the people and you seek help. Henry Ford had a great line in his corporation, the old man. He said, look, failure is just an opportunity to start over again more intelligently. So, the first three pyramids now. The first level of the first step, do as you're told, identify gaps. Well, the style of the leader here in regard to communication, it's just more one way. I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, and then we're going to show you it, and then we're going to do it. You're going to do it, and I'm going to observe you. Second step is now more coaching, because now they know what they don't know. And at this level, now it's more explain, show, do. You can ask more open-ended questions. That's going to deepen the learning process. And the what questions are great here too. Then your third step, again, that is going to be higher communication between the leader and the follower here. And that then leads us to the fourth step. And the fourth step, as you said, Dan, in going back to my opening here with my story in England, and John gave me that assignment in the first week. Now you can come up with your own solutions because you've become consciously competent. You can now start applying the change that is necessary because you've seen a lot of the experiences. You've experienced a lot and you've applied a lot of the solutions, and now you can start coming up with your own solutions. Then the fifth step is now you can teach it. And the trouble with our society is, again, it goes back to what Dan and I have said many, many times here, and it's worth repeating. We can't live with that delayed gratification. What many people want to do, and it reminds me of a Super Bowl commercial about, 5-8 years ago, where there's two consultants sitting and talking to the CEO, and in the next scene you see him walking out and they're giving the CEO their pitch, and then the next scene you see him walking through the lobby of this beautiful building and going out the doors, and the one consultant looks over at the other and says, "Can you believe it? He actually wanted us to implement it." Well, all right, they want to flip that pyramid over and start teaching before they even actually have mastered it. Not, fake it till you make it doesn't work. Mastery takes time.
That's really interesting. I've never thought about it in this context, though. But the year after my freshman year of college, I went back to my high school and taught summer school. I went to a way I ended up in Minnesota is I came up here to go to boarding school. And so after I graduated, I'd gone off to college, and then that following summer, I came back and taught summer school. And usually the summer school was for my high school had a lot of students from overseas, especially the Far East. And so a lot of those students would come over and do their ESL, English as a second language, and just get prepared to be taking classes in English for the first time. And I was teaching, I think I taught some computer courses, and I can't even remember what else I taught. Maybe I taught like a typing class or something like that. And literally, I had that experience of I started sitting down to think about, okay, what am I going to teach here? And I realized that most of the things that I was going to be teaching, I was probably only on level 2 or 3 of the mastery pyramid. And so I actually had to go back and do quite a bit of work to get to the point where I felt comfortable, standing up and teaching. And then that, of course, is, I think all of our listeners would understand that to be comfortable in getting up in front of a group of people and teaching it, that you really have to have gone through all of those steps in order to, unless you're, like you said, completely faking it, to get up and answer questions. I still remember the first training course I did when you hired me back in 1996, and gentleman advisor Bob K, since we're using initials, and I was terrified because I knew he knew tons more than I did, and I was there teaching him an operations class. So yeah, in certain circumstances you get thrown into those, but you everybody kind of knows intuitively, in order to be able to teach something, especially in a classroom situation like that, you really have to know it frontwards and backwards, and you have to have gone through all of those steps.
Right. And if you get thrown out there and you're not co-teaching with the master at that time, and like your scenario you described, honesty is the best policy. You know what? We're going to learn together here. I'm not, this is my first time. I'm going solo here, and as the old saying goes, take what you like and leave the rest. But let's, we'll get through this together.
Yeah, I still remember the one funny flashpoint of that was when I referred to a joint IRA, jointly owned IRA, which of course everybody knows, individual retirement account. Cannot be owned jointly. It's right there in the title, individual.
Yeah, they're our acronyms again. Now, I'd like to give a shout out here to Brother Ray. Now, and I want to frame this. Ray taught me this, and it's one of those things that just contextually hits you right between the eyes and I think it will for you as well. And I sincerely hope so. You're setting, you got your leadership hat on, and you've got this all framed up, and what you're doing. If you're using this 5 levels of mastery. And it's going to require more support of the leader, particularly if you're dealing with a novice or someone's new to your industry or they're just new tasks. So if as the leader, though, and talking about creating a great environment, is if you use this tool to help frame things, and you set expectations as you're going through this with the follower, and you provide support, as we said, that first level, second level. Look, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, then I'm going to show you, then you're going to do it. The next level, I'm going to explain it to you, then I'm going to show you, then you're going to do it. It takes more time, but what you're doing is you're setting expectations and you're providing support. That builds trust. Setting expectations and not providing any support, that erodes trust. There's an old Harvard Business Review. What are the 4 things employees want from their employer? The first one is they want to be appreciated. Secondly, they want to be recognized. Thirdly, if you are going to hold me accountable, you got to give me the tools and the knowledge in order to be able to do the job. If you don't provide those, then it's not fair for you to hold me accountable. And number 4 is money, and there are averages there. So, but that number 3, if you're going to hold me accountable, you got to give me the tools and the knowledge in order to be able to do the job.
Yeah, I'll jump in and just point out, I'm a person that really thrives on doing new tasks. In fact, I often say that my one really true talent is if you give 100 people a new task, I'm going to be in the top 5 of people that figure out how to do it at least reasonably well in the first day, right? Now, if you come back a month later, I'm going to have dropped into the 50th percentile because I tend to lose focus when I do things repetitively, and then I lose interest, and then frankly my quality drops. But I'm really good at kind of intuitively figuring things out. And so like I've been in like the company we worked at with your partner would often let me run and do things, but we had an understanding. He always said, hey, you don't have to come and ask me every single time when you don't know how to do something. Try and figure it out, do what you think is best, and then if it's wrong, we'll circle back and I'll correct you, but I'm not going to punish you for taking initiative and doing things. So you can have employees that you empower to do things like that, but you must not then hang them out to dry. And I will say that Nate never did that. He never came back and he would come back and say, yeah, that's not how I would have done that. I would have preferred you would have done it this way. But he never ever held a grudge. He never punished me for it. And we had a very good relationship. And once I understood that, it was fine. And I felt comfortable with it. But that takes an extreme amount of trust, and then you actually have to follow through then and say, okay, I'm not going to punish you for it, and you have to do what you say. So I just wanted to point that out that, yeah, hey, look, if you have people that have initiative and aren't afraid of making decisions, that's awesome, but you need to understand exactly how that framework would work as well.
Yes, and again, as the leader, it does take that type of framework and that type of leader style takes less work, but get ready. If you don't, I caution, you got to be very careful that, it's not a huge decision that could have a big impact on your culture, the net income, or the, processes or the retention of your people.
I remember the story I told about the $10,000 or $20,000 loss that I caused. That was because of that. So, but to his credit, he just didn't hold me accountable for it. He didn't make me pay for it. And then if you're willing to take that risk, and there are some leaders that just are out doing their thing, and they're more of that entrepreneurial style, and they want people that are going to do that for them. But I would agree that that's not a very relevant leadership style, because you have to have exactly the right people. Like the leader has to be exactly the right person, and the follower has to be exactly the right person too.
And to his credit, what he did is he really was practicing Henry Ford. Look, mistake is okay. We're going to make them. We're all going to make mistakes. And when we do, though, one of the first questions he would always ask, what'd you learn from it? So, again, there's the what question, making that person to go internal. And by having them go internal, what you're doing is giving them an opportunity to gain their own insight and aha moment. So then you got a better chance of long-term behavioral change because they figured it out themselves. So that's, again, kind of the level 2 now where you're starting to use those questions. Now, going back, thinking about the culture of leadership here, and what Ray taught me, if you're going to set expectations and you provide support, that's going to build trust. Set expectations and no support, that erodes trust. And no expectations with support, I'd suggest you're probably going to get a bad ROI on that, or your return on your investment. And no support and no expectations, you probably just got chaos going on in your environment. So I just wanted to use that as another framework for you if you're going to be setting expectations. Think about what type of support you're going to be providing your people. And no support and no expectations, well, you got chaos. And if you're gonna be stupid, is one of my old sayings, you better be strong, because there's gonna be enough mistakes here, and hopefully you can just weather them before you get too frustrated.
Yeah, that's a great interview question. If you're interviewing for a position, I'm certain this came from you, but what does my day look like? What does a typical day look like for me? And if they don't have those expectations right on the tip of their tongue, it's a huge sign that, hey, this person doesn't have this role really all that well mapped out. But it's a great way to drill down into that and know, hey, what are those expectations? And then the follow-up question is, and then how do we communicate those actions back and forth between you as the leader and me as the employee?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because here's another great question. To assess a follower's readiness level, might go something like this. Dan, I want you to own this task, and the task is this. And the reason this is important for you in your continued growth and development, so tell me, what are the actual steps you're going to take to make sure you complete this task successfully? By asking that question, now you just listen, and if I get from Dan all the right steps that are needed, because I have mastery of this task, so I can confirm, boy, I'm letting them run with it. Versus, I don't want to be seen here now as providing too much support to someone who has a high readiness level, because now I'm overleading, and that can get to be very frustrating. It's kind of like a parent to child type of leadership role, and that's not healthy. So, Dan, any other insights that you might have from this the 5 levels of mastery? Because I said from the very beginning I was going to come back, and you'd mentioned steps 4 and 5. Well, with the story with England, with John, there's no way I could come to step 4 and do that assessment like I did. I analyzed, then I looked at what needed to have happen in order for the change to occur, from just the number of premium households to what the competencies of the 2 divisional vice presidents were missing. Did that help out and bring some clarity to that step 4 and step 5, or anything else you could share with some people?
No, I think the bottom line for me is this is such just a foundational concept in terms of interpersonal communication between a leader or a leadership group and the employees. I worked at a firm who spent, I know for certain 7 figures, and potentially a bigger than 7-figure number, bringing in a group to train our entire company, which was about 3,500 employees. And their entire concept was about having a common language to communicate things within the company, emotional states and different business items. And this to me is a core foundational aspect of that. It's essentially a language for the leader and the employee to share, to be able to explain to one another where you are on the scale of mastery. And so outlining this early on, to be able to say to someone if they kind of dump something on you. The example of that we used a couple of weeks back of tough messages when my boss asked me to fire the advisor, and I don't have that mastery. I've never done it. I don't have any experience doing it, and I would have completely botched it, and I'm sure it would have been horrible for me. It would have been horrible for the advisor.
Horrible for the culture, but you had the courage to tell them, no, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, and emotionally, I had a hard time as well, just because it was, like I mentioned in that story, it was the right call. It was an insensitive time. For those of you that haven't listened to that episode, it was 5 days before Christmas, which is the reason I remember it is it was my birthday, and that advisor had just had his 4th child, and so I thought it was a little bit insensitive to do it at that point. It was the right call, but I just didn't have the skill set. So to be able to just say, I can't accomplish that because I've never done it, and I don't have the skill, I don't have the mastery, and it was accepted. Like my boss said, okay, yeah, I get that, and we moved on, and he took that task and did it. So I just think it's so crucial to having a good and open relationship, to be able to communicate exactly where you are on that mastery level, and that's why I think it's such an important thing, and why it comes up so often. To tie a bow on all of this, the reason why Philip is constantly sharing the 5 levels of mastery with me and his 3 real sons, me the adopted son, and his 3 sons, and why we joke about it is because it is really, really, really applicable in not just professional situations, but also in your personal situations, in relationships you have with your partners or your roommates or your friends. This concept of having mastery over things is pretty universal. So
Dan, I'm gonna I know where you're going, but I'm gonna stop you because you do. There's one last insight I want to give
absolutely
our people here, and you brought it to my attention. And the new advisor or the new employee, and sharing this language with them, or the 5 levels of mastery, remember, I'm going to ask you to remember this. If you are the leader and you are responsible for recruiting and the hiring, you hire talent. Those are things that are innate. You're born with them. You're good at it. Could be math, could be music, could be, good intuition, good, problem solving. You can conceptualize things. Then you develop skills, and you teach decision making. And that's how this thing, needs to be framed. In the latter 2, you're going to be using this to help develop their skills, and also assist them in making good decisions. And to sustain optimal performance over a long period of time, you need to have talent, skills, and decision making. But studies have shown decision making is 2 times more powerful than the other 2 traits. By sharing this model, you will be able to frame some of those harder, tougher messages as well, using the whole message model around the readiness level, what they're doing well at, if it's positive feedback, or look, I have some behaviors we need to correct. So if you haven't, I'm going to put a plug in here. Go back and listen to the tough messages model too. The whole message: I see, I think, I feel, I want. particularly when you're looking at the readiness piece.
And I will echo that. Most of the times that I have been hired in a leadership position, the number one thing that I got hired for was decision making. Like the ability to make decisions for the boss or the leader in their absence. And it's, I think, one of the things that I figured out early on is that figuring out what your leader wants and what the goal of the company is, if that's clearly defined, it allows you then to make your decisions in that context, because as we all know, not every company, not every leader is going to want to run things exactly the way that you want them run. And by having that all completely laid out, with the 5 levels of mastery, and then that also leads you to being a good communicator of other topics, having that, it's decision making that in that framework is the thing that I have been hired for more often than not. So with that, we will wrap up the main section of the podcast for this week and move on to our article. Article this week is Successful Retirement Plans Are Built on These 5 Pillars. Just a quick note, I will post a link to the article on our Twitter feed at value_ability. It is also on our website, value-ability.com, under the content tab. Scroll down past the downloads, and the links are in the second section. But we have all of the links to all of the articles that we discuss in our podcasts on the website as well. So I'll jump in at first.
Sure.
And just say that people who have been listening to our podcasts are gonna very quickly understand why I picked this out. Number 1 is at the beginning of the article, it talks about blueprint of building your house, and it's very similar to our 4 cornerstones. Again, a quick plug for a previous episode. Go back and listen to our 4 cornerstones episode. The foundation is your principal, protected, safe assets. The walls are your growth and income. Compound of assets not generally tied directly to the stock market. And then your roof is your growth-oriented equity-style investments. That's very similar to our 4 cornerstones. It's just missing the risk management portion. But then it also goes on to reinforce something that we talk about consistently, and I'll quickly list off the 5 pillars that this article mentions. Number 1, income planning. 2, investment planning. 3, tax planning. 4, healthcare planning. And number 5, legacy planning. And that also kind of dovetails on with the episode that went as a partner to the 4 Cornerstones, which was our Need, Fun, Love episode. Both Philip and I are huge believers in comprehensive planning. And the only thing I took slight issue with in this is that I don't think that this is necessarily the 5 pillars for a retirement plan. These are the 5 pillars for your lifetime financial plan. All of these pillars are for the entire process of getting through your life. You need to have these things built in. Now, the income planning doesn't come until just prior to retirement, but it is something that you should understand and have built into your plan overall. And I just thought it was a great reinforcement of the topics that we have been talking about over and over and over. Last episode, when we were talking about the use of advisor versus broker or representative. If you're calling yourself an advisor, you really need to be offering information on all aspects of helping people through their financial lives. And these 5 pillars, I think, are a great reinforcement of that concept that you need to be talking about taxes. Yes, investments, it's the sexy one, right? Especially in my generation, we're all, my generation, it was the movie Wall Street. Everybody wants to be Gordon Gekko on his mobile phone, walking on the beach and being the big, stock market shark. That's not what this business is about. This business is about helping people manage risks and attain goals. And so much of our business focuses just on the investment side of things. And look, that's super important. Of course it's important. But the reality is that you can make as much, if not more, of an impact for people in the areas of income planning, tax planning, healthcare planning, and legacy planning that dwarfs what you do from an investment side. So that was the main reason why I wanted to bring this article up. Is I just thought it was a great kind of synthesis of a number of things that we've talked about, topics that we've talked about, and we have healthcare and legacy planning on our list of topics for future episodes too. So keep your ears peeled out for those. So Philip, your thoughts?
Yeah, that was a great article, and it just supports a lot of our philosophy on financial planning. Items I'm going to highlight that I'd ask every one of our listeners to be mindful of again is that silent embezzler inflation. And the length of time that you can potentially have in your retirement years. You better make sure from just a income planning that you keep your dollars invested in equities, which are the best hedge against inflation, so that you could potentially, you're going to have a strategy that doubles or even triples in retirement. If you retire early at 60 and you live another 30 years and you have 3% inflation, 24 years, if you had $100,000, you needed $100,000, you're going to need $200,000. Well, how are you going to do that? You've given up your number one asset, your ability to work. So now it's your second number one asset. It's your money earning money for you. So don't lose sight of that. You got to keep some money in equities. I like their investment planning, risk tolerance, and for those of you advisors who maybe have not looked at this, take a look. There's a link right to it. Look at Riskalyze. People, when you're talking about risk tolerance, though, talk to them in actual dollars that they could lose. I think that's very, very important. And with that investment planning, for those of you who have got your 401ks, great vehicle to plan for and invest for retirement, but look at the actual internal costs that when you're selecting your investments in your 401k. And if they have ETFs, I would encourage you to use the ETFs because they have much less internal fees. And as that article points out, there can be a big savings over 30 years from these internal fees. Then the last thing I'll just say in this article, they do, their risk management side is it says according to government estimates, someone turning 65 now has almost a 70% chance of needing long-term care services at some point in their life. If you're looking at a solid retirement plan, then should look at those health care costs. What would happen if one of you go, 7 out of 10 people, you're one of those 7 that goes into and you need assisted living or a nursing home. And if you want to leave a legacy too, boy, they're going to be conflicting for most people because your dollars are going to be, if a nursing home, it's like 10 to 12 grand a month right now. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. Great article. As the advisor, you're paid to provide this education, provide the sound money management, and as Dan said, I truly believe it's a very noble profession if done properly, and you're a glorified social worker by heart, but you're a capitalist by brain. And all of those of you are just, are not advisors listening. My point to you all is, have some goals, establish those goals, and it's okay to be selfish when you're doing your goal planning, particularly if it's around the area of finances and helping you eventually have your what we would call FU money, Dan. And you're going to probably need that when you're 50. You want to have options.
Yeah, I will just wrap that up and say, both Philip and I are strong believers in that, full comprehensive planning. But again, as we've discussed in previous episodes, there is nothing wrong with being an insurance specialist or being just an investment advisor. Be clear with people. Don't hold yourself out as a comprehensive, or even, I won't even say that people hold themselves out as that with bad intentions, but don't have that out there. And when you're really only doing one of these things, be extremely clear with clients, if all you are is an investment advisor, that, hey, look, there are other areas that you need to get information from some other professionals on the areas of insurance. And I would also go a step further and recommend you should have some relationships with people. If you are a specialist like that, have some referral relationships with an insurance specialist. So
try to have three. So you if you're going to give them up.
Correct. Yes, you need to have multiple referrals. And also, not every client is going to take you up on it, right? Look, I've had it happen. You bring up life insurance and literally the client's eyes roll back in their head and they just don't want to talk about it. That's fine. You need to have had the discussion so that in the future you can come back and say, hey, look, we did have this discussion if it ever pops up. And also just for your peace of mind, knowing that you did everything that you could to protect that client. And then just one last quick point, because I think it's just such an important thing, as Philip mentioned with inflation. So many people do not realize that when they give up their job, it's the first time in their life that they have not been protected in some way against inflation. Being employed naturally, buffers you from inflation, because over time, through cost of living increases or promotions, your income goes up. And so when you retire, it's the first time you have ever been laid bare to inflation, and people just don't understand it. So I don't want to belabor the point, but you have to belabor the point with clients about it, because they just have a hard time. I use the catchphrase, they understand it intellectually, but cannot believe it emotionally until, usually I find it's about 5 to 6 years, where clients will come back and say, hey, you know what? This inflation thing is really kind of a bummer. As they start to feel that drag on their income. So it's just something that I am super, super passionate about, is making sure people understand that that is their number one enemy, not market loss when they retire. So with that, we will wrap up for the week. If you have topics that you would like us to cover or questions for us, reach out to us on our Twitter account at value_ability. That is the best way to get in touch with us. You can also reach us through our website, value-ability.com. Click on the Contact Us tab, and there's a form there where you can submit topics or questions, or you can reach us on Facebook. Search at Value Ability, all one word, on Facebook. We do have a mailing list. If you would like updates from us, sign up for our mailing list, value-ability.com. Also on the Contact Us tab, there is a sign up for our mailing list. Wherever you find us, please like, review, subscribe, and share. And again, sharing is the best thing you can do for us at this point, as we are now getting into the double digits of episodes. Actually, I did want to say just a quick congratulations to Philip, as this is our 15th episode. we have discussed, and I'll share with the listeners, the mean number of episodes of all the podcasts in the world is 15. So we are now on the plus side of the average, quote unquote, or the mean number of episodes for all. There's slightly over 1 million podcasts. So we are continuing on. So next episode, as we break that barrier, episode 16, Traits of a High-Functioning Team. So please tune in next week. Before then, tell us about a time when you gained mastery over a certain topic, and how did it come about? How did you attain that mastery? Reach out to us on one of our platforms. Let us know your experiences with mastery. Until then, thank you for listening. Join us next week. And always remember that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. This is a podcast collaboration, not a peer-reviewed journal or a sponsored publication. We make no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this podcast, and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information, or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. It is the listener's responsibility to verify their own facts. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on this podcast. Strategies or investments discussed may fluctuate in price or value. Investors may get back less than invested. Investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast. Before acting on information on this podcast, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular circumstances, and strongly consider seeking advice from your own financial or investment advisor. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Assumptions are not reflective of the position of any entity other than the authors, and since we are critically thinking human beings, these views are always subject to change, revision, and rethinking at any time. Please do not hold us to them in perpetuity.